Hello, welcome to the program. Today we're going to do a vid on replacing a valve cover gasket on this beautiful 2009 328i. This car actually has 2 oil leaks. This is the non-turbo 6-cylinder, a very good engine, very reliable. It has 2. It has one on this valve, on this oil filter housing, very common. But it also has one in the back. It's hard to see until you're underneath the vehicle, the valve cover gasket. And we're recommending the valve cover gasket first. The customer's tight on money, just because it's a little bit of a safety concern. The oil is leaking onto the catalytic converters, which we know is the hottest part of the exhaust pretty much. So we don't need an oil fire in this car. Here's a picture of the gaskets for the valve cover. These are for the spark plug tubes. This right here is for the eccentric shaft sensor, and this right here is for the Valvetronic adjusting motor, and of course the main perimeter gasket of the valve cover. Sometimes on these valve covers, if it has high mileage, we recommend to replace the whole valve cover assembly, just because it is plastic, and many times you go back together with it and it could crack. After taking these microfilter covers off up here, they're little 8mm screws, you're going to want to take this strut brace off. So this one right here is a eTorx 14. The socket looks like that. And the one back here, you can use a flathead, a big flathead to turn this and take it off. That one there is an E18 eTorx that fits in there. Now when going back on with these strut braces, you want to make sure the car is on the ground, because it needs the tension and the weight of the vehicle before you strap these things back down. Otherwise the car could creak, or it'll have tension in the wrong areas and the car might drift to one side or the other. So you want to make sure the car is on the ground before you tighten those back up. We're going to take this cover off, and we're going to access the valve cover underneath, and it'll give us room. Now you want to disconnect the battery. That's the best way. This thing right here is the positive for the battery, for the jumping point. You want to disconnect the battery in the back, because when you're using tools in here and stuff like this, it's very easy to arc this thing. You're going to blow a fuse in the back. It's $300 to replace. You want to make sure you disconnect the battery beforehand. Here's the battery in the back. You just need to disconnect the negative battery terminal here. Lay it to the side. It's a good practice to put a rag of some sort over the terminal so the memory of the cable won't jump it back on there. You're going to want to take this cover off here. Loosen the harness. There's a ground, 2 grounds right here on the side, so you can get this stuff out of the way, and bungee cord it up somewhere just to move it out so you have room. You're going to take the coils out. You're going to take the ground straps off, and we're also going to take the injector rail off. It has these little tiny pins in here that you have to separate and kind of pull. Just be careful. It's very fragile, all that plastic area. Everything is out of the way now, nice and tucked to the side. You want to take this coolant hose off so you can have extra room here. Now you can see the Valvetronic eccentric shaft motor. This thing is under extreme amount of tension, so you want to get an Allen, a 5 Allen, and put it in the back end here, and screw it clockwise to release all the tension. And when you come out with it, all you have to do is unscrew it again in the opposite direction. And this is important, because if you don't do it, the Valvetronic eccentric shaft will snap closed, and it could possibly damage some components in there. So this is called the worm gear there. Now you want to turn that Allen counterclockwise before you loosen the bolts for that motor. I didn't specify that, so make sure you do that before you loosen the bolts for the motor. and then you can loosen the bolts and pull the motor out. The valve cover is off. Everything looks clean on this car. This guy obviously does his oil changes. This car's got around 70,000 miles, so he's taking care of it. Before you pull the cover off, you want to make sure you blow any debris that's on the sides here, because when you pull the cover, all that stuff will fall on the motor. So you just want to keep everything clean. And here's the underside of the valve cover, where the gasket lays here. When you pull the gasket off, you want to clean this very well. You can put little dabs, just small dabs of silicone to hold the gasket on, just a little. You don't want to go crazy with it. It's the gasket that seals it, not the silicone, just a little tiny dab. You can pull these out, put them in later. When going back together, you want to tighten the center bolts and spiral outwards so you can evenly apply pressure. Now you want to do this job with hand tools, otherwise you will crack this valve cover. Replacing this gasket goes here. You want to make sure, it's very important, that this little nipple right here faces downwards. It kind of looks like it can go either way, but you want to make sure, otherwise this thing will have an air leak and you'll have to remove it and reinstall it correctly. This gasket right here for the eccentric shaft position sensor, you just install it as so, and you want to find an appropriate socket and lightly tap with a rubber mallet to fit it in, and it should seat nicely. One thing I do need to mention is when you're tightening down this valve cover, you want to check with a mirror along the perimeter to make sure the gasket hasn't rolled or falled in or has gotten damaged or pinched in any way. When you set the valve cover down, and also during this tightening sequence, you want to make sure this is a common error and you don't want to find out later on a test drive this thing's leaking oil. Alright, everything turned out perfect on the test drive. Just make sure no oil is leaking or nothing like that. Engine's running smooth. Sometimes it may not leak oil, but it may leak air in and it'll cause a rough idle. So everything turned out good. I want to mention that this repair is a moderate to advanced skill level. I know anybody can loosen bolts and tighten bolts, and this is pretty, it's got multiple layers to it, which is not a problem. The thing is with this job is it requires a lot of finesse. And the reason being is because there's a lot of plastic components, there's a lot of tight, it's hard to get the valve cover out, a lot of other things are plastic in there, and a common error for many people, especially if it's their first time, is breaking a lot of the plastic parts. And obviously you want to keep the cost to a minimum. So just take your time on it, and everything should be good. And tune in next time for some more videos. See you.